Okay, we're in chapter 4. We're on page 1255.
Hey, Rabbi, can I ask a quick question first?
Sure.
So it says on 1253 that Mordecai adopted Esther as a daughter, right?
Yeah.
But it seems like you were implying yesterday that, or not yesterday, sorry, like last week, that really they were married.
So I didn't say really. What I said was there is a difference of opinion about this subject, whether they were really married or not.
Well, it says before that he adopted her as a daughter. You can't marry your daughter, right?
Yes, that's true. But we know who she was. She was his first cousin. We know that.
Yeah,
Okay, and you can marry your first cousin.
you could. I suppose.
And adopting someone doesn't change who you can marry.
Mhm.
So that's not really an issue. But the point is that once you say he raised her, then to say he took her as a daughter, it's poetry, and sometimes the texts do engage in poetry. And then it says it again when she goes into Achashverosh, that he took her to be a daughter. Like, so what? Or what's it got to do with her going into Achashverosh?
Ah.
So it sounds like the text is delicately indicating to you that there was more going on there. And I said it's a difference of opinion. It's not proven, not the fact, it's just this difference of opinion, which means everything in the scenario has to be worked out both ways. Right? Okay. Now, so here we are at the very bottom of page 1255. It now starts an exquisite interaction between Mordechai and Esther, which, as I indicated last time, is a model for husband-wife relations, for friendship, for sensitive interactions across the board. Anyway, Mordechai is crying in the streets, wearing sackcloth, and Esther has no idea why that's happening. So Esther's mates and servants came and told her about it. And the queen was greatly distressed. She sent garments to clothe Mordechai so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Now, what's her interest here? The reporters are coming from Vogue, and you're not going to look good? You'll take pictures, and you're going to be a scandal? No, we saw this in the immediately preceding paragraph, beginning of chapter 4. Mordechai learned of all that had been done. Mordechai tore his clothes, put on sackcloth with ashes, went out of the midst of the city, cried loudly and bitterly, came until the front of the king's gate, but only until the front, not even into the front of the gate, for it was forbidden to enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. So why is she sending Mordechai a change of clothes?
So he can come in.
So he can come in and tell her. That's why. Right? And he says, no. Have to figure out why. What's the meaning of it? If he's sending a signal, what kind of signal is it? So let's just put that on hold. That's something that has to be understood. Okay, then there's another way to get information, through a middle person. Then Esther summoned Hasach, one of the king's servants, whom he had appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordechai to learn what this was about and why. Now in the Hebrew it's mazeh ve'al mazeh. Mazeh means, what is this? And al mazeh means roughly, what's it for? What's its purpose? What's its value? What is its significance? And I've quoted my teacher, Rabbi Meiselman, many times. He wrote an essay on this subject, and he pointed out that she's asking two different questions on two different levels. And the important thing to notice is that both are necessary. One is, what's happening? You obviously understand that there's a terrible danger. Who are the enemies? What kind of leverage do they have? What resources do we have? What is the time schedule for the danger? What are the social, political, monetary, economic, military facts that go into the challenge we are discussing? That's mazeh. It's the challenge that we're facing. That's what is it. Al mazeh is, what does the Kodesh Baruch Hu want? Where does this fit into divine providence? And you need both. Now, as a pious person, you'll say, of course, knowing all the physical facts isn't enough. Of course, you have to know what the Hashgacha wants. That's quite true. But the opposite is also true, because if you know there is a failure somewhere and God wants us to do tshuva, that's not enough. You have to know where the failure is. You have to know what kind of repair is relevant for the failure. You have to know what kind of danger you're facing, because the danger itself will dictate how you look at the failure. We'll talk about that in a few days, Miyatasha. So you need to know both the naturalistic features of the situation and also what the divine providence wants from the situation. And that's why Esther, in her sophisticated way, says to Hasach, ask Mordechai, Mazeh v'al Mazeh. Okay. So, Hasach went out to Mordechai, unto city square, which was in front of the king's gate. And Mordechai told him of all that had happened to him. Interesting. Happened to him. And all about the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay to the royal treasuries for the annihilation of the Jews. Somehow, Mordechai knows everything. He even knows things that are completely private. This business of offering the money was a private conversation between Achashverosh and Haman. So we have to understand that Ruach HaKodesh was operating here, because otherwise there was no way that he could know this. Now, why does he want Esther to know about the proposed bribe? And he doesn't mention whether the king accepted it or not. We know the king didn't accept it, and we know why he didn't accept it. But Mordechai doesn't have to mention that, because he's sending a signal to Esther. Don't think we're going to get out of this by bribery. It's not going to work. Because whatever money you'll propose, Haman will propose more. He's into this. And he's willing to pay for it. So that's not good leverage to think that you have a naturalistic solution. He also gave him a copy of the text of the decree which is distributed in Shushan for their destruction, so that he might show it to Esther and inform her. Now, here's what Mordechai is telling Esther to do, bidding her to go to the king, to appeal to him, and to plead with him for her people. Because there's no other choice. There's no other way to do it. That's the message that Hasach brings to Esther. Hasach came and told Esther what Mordechai had said. Then Esther told Hasach to return to Mordechai with the following message, with this message. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces are well aware that if anyone, man or woman, approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, without being called, there is but one law for him, that he should be put to death. The king is in his inner court. He has been for a while. When the king goes into the inner court, he's considering something of great importance, great significance, great value. You don't interrupt him when he's there. To the point where if someone interrupts him, the law says he should be killed. Now, of course, there's an exception, except for the person to whom the king shall extend the gold scepter so that he may live. The king is in control of the law. The king is not bound by the law. The king could waive the law. But the norm, without making an exception, is if you go in, you're going to be killed. And I have not been summoned to come to the king in the past 30 days. So what is Esther saying? Part of what she's saying is this. You want me to go and appeal to the king. You want me to make an appeal to him to cancel this decree. When you make an appeal to someone, you want to be on his good side. You don't want to disobey his law in his face and say, and by the way, I have a tremendous favor I want to ask you. That's not reasonable. Furthermore, although she hasn't mentioned it, but she saw from the paper, and he knows also, the decree is for 11 months from now. 11 months! That's a long time. There is no doubt that at some time in the not too distant future, he will call for me. When he calls for me, he wants me. When he wants me, then I have a position where I could argue, I could discuss with him, and I could make an appeal to him. He wants something from me, I want something from him, That's a reasonable thing. But to go in and create extra doubt, extra damage, extra defiance, and then ask for a favor, is not logical. It's not logical. Okay. Now, look at Mordechai's response. I'm not able to take Mordechai's response as fully true the way it's stated. I can't do it. I looked in the commentaries. I didn't see anybody who did it. Maybe I'm missing something or missing something out of logic, but I can't do it. So I'm going to interpret it in a certain way. I just came across a pasuk in the Torah where the commentaries say the way it's written can't be right. So that such a thing could happen. They related Esther's words to Mordechai. Then Mordechai said to reply to Esther, "Do not imagine that you will be able to escape in the king's palace any more than the rest of the Jews. No one knows who she is. No one knows who she is. So there's a decree against the Jews. Could happen that all the Jews will be killed and she'll be spared." So he says, don't imagine that you have that leverage. Don't imagine that you have that protection. No, that's a false imagination. For if you persist in keeping silent at a time like this, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from some other place. The Jews are not going to be destroyed. The Jews are not going to be annihilated. While you and your father's house will perish. If you don't go in to beg the king, you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether it was just for such a time as this that you attained the royal position. We had no clue why you became queen. Here it is, black and white. This is what you need to do. Now, when Mordecai says to her, don't imagine that you'll be able to escape in the king's palace, I don't think that's what she's imagining. And I don't think that's what Mordecai is imagining that she's imagining. That's just beyond belief. She's not indifferent as to the fate of the Jews. It's not fine with her that everybody should die and she'll just escape in the palace. That's for sure not. But he's creating an imaginary alternative here to stress how serious this moment is. How serious this moment is. How does Mordechai have confidence that the Jews will be saved? Because he saw the response of the Jews in Shushan. As soon as the decree was promulgated, and he knew about it, with the Malbim's 2 decrees and so forth and so on, and he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and started wailing in the streets, so did everybody else. Now, of course, he doesn't have SMS messages from all the provinces, but he sees how the Jews in Shushan responded. If the Jews like that, throughout the empire, are going to respond like that, they're not going to be annihilated. That's for sure. But you're here to be the instrument of this salvation. If you don't do it, somebody else will do it. But you were put here to do it. Therefore, you have to do it. And if you don't do it, then you and your father's house will be destroyed. Now, here, I've told you many times, I do the verses as they are verses in the text, and I don't rely on Midrashim and so on and so on, just because I'm ignorant of the Midrashim. But there is a Midrash here, and it's of contemporary importance that I should mention this to you. The Midrash describes how Esther lived in the palace. She's been in the palace 4 years. She only ate beans. She only ate beans because she made sure that they would be kosher. The only thing that she could get to was she made sure there was beans. She had 7 maids serving her, 1 for each day of the week. So that this one, Esmeralda, she's the Shabbos maid. When she comes on duty, she knows that it's Shabbos. She kept Shabbos punctiliously. Now, what does Mordechai say to her? You're keeping kashrus, you're keeping Shabbos. If you don't go into the king and plead on behalf of the Jews, you're going to be destroyed. Which means that even though you're keeping Shabbos and keeping kashrus, that won't save you. Now, it's not as if to say that Shabbos and kashrus aren't important. They are important. And to be rewarded for them in the world to come. But now I'm speaking the language of contemporary Gottlieb. There's something that could be called the challenge of the generation. That is the challenge that this generation has to address, and If it succeeds, then the generation will be successful. If not, the generation will fail. Yes, each individual will get the merit for all the mitzvahs that he did. Yes, yes, yes. But this is the difference between success and failure in this generation. That's what Mordechai is saying to Esther. And many Gedolim have said that the way in which the Jewish community stands up to the challenge of technology is the challenge of this generation. Yes, we have yeshivas, and we have kashas, and we have shuls, and we have mikvos, and we have lots and lots of wonderful things. Yes, we do. But they won't prevent, God forbid, a disaster if we fail in the challenge of the generation. And the challenge of the generation is how we deal with technology. I have a son who's working in this full time. He's been doing so for 15 years already. And he heard this from Mattisyahu Solomon. He should be well. And other Gedolim with whom he consults regularly. Okay, so now, but there's something else here. Why is Mordechai coming down so hard on her? Accusing her of this terrible lapse. What, you're going to hide in the palace and the Jews will go down the drain and you, when it isn't true. I can't imagine that it's true. I can't imagine that it's true. Well, let's see. Is it possible that Mordechai sent Esther a signal and she missed it? Her response to Mordechai's communication shows she missed the signal. Let's go back. He's running through the streets, torn clothes, sackcloth, ashes, and she sends him clothes. Sends him clothes. Change your clothes and come into the palace and tell me what it's about. How long will that take? 20 minutes? Mordechai refuses. What's the signal? Not even 20 minutes. Not even 20 minutes. Nothing can be wasted. Now. The determining factor is now. She sends back a message. Mordechai, we have 11 months. I haven't been called in 30 days. Surely that's going to turn around. Next week, next month. Mordechai says, I couldn't take off 20 minutes to come in and see you. You didn't get that? You didn't hear that? Well, then you're a little bit disconnected. You're a little bit disconnected. You're in the palace, and being in the palace has dulled your sensitivities, dulled your intelligence to read the signal that I sent you. That is part of why he responds so bitterly and so strictly against her, because he sees that there's this gap, this distance, which prevents her from clearly perceiving the message that he sent. You with me so far? Now watch how the situation balances out. This, I think, is absolutely unbelievable. So, then Esther said to reply to Mordechai, go assemble all the Jews to be found in Shushan and fast for me. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go into the king. Go and assemble all the Jews to fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day, 72 hours. No food and no drink. I with my maids will fast also. Then I will go into the king, though it's unlawful. And if I perish, I perish. Okay, that's what she says. Now the next words, innocent words, hide a secret. Mordechai then left, did exactly as Esther had commanded him. But the Hebrew says, Vaya'avor Mordechai. Mordechai passed over and did, according to everything that Esther commanded him. What did he pass over? So the commentators who are interested in Pshat said this was in the palace. The palace had a moat. You know what a moat is, right? It's a ditch with water in it, making it impossible to just charge and attack. He passed over the bridge that goes over the moat and went out to talk to the people. Could be. Could very well be. You would have to ask, why did the Megillah bother to tell us that? Who cares whether he passed over the moat or not? The Midrash says something else. Let's figure this out. On what day of what month is all this taking place? The 13th of Nisan. She says, fast for me, 72 hours. That's the 14th, the 15th, and the 16th. Well, the night of the 15th is the night of the Cedar. And the night of the 15th, there's a very important mitzvah to do. It's called matzah. during Golos, right? They can't bring the sacrifice in the temple. But matzah is a biblical commandment to do on the night of the 15th. She's saying to Mordechai, all the Jews in Shushan will not do the mitzvah of matzah. The Midrash has Mordechai say to her, I shouldn't have said it that way. The Midrash records what Mordechai said to her. He said to her, we're trying to make an appeal to the king. The king is the Shlub sitting on the throne and the creator. Will it benefit us to make this appeal by violating one of his commandments? How will that help the force of our appeal? Surely we want to do the commandment. And she says back to him, you told me you couldn't wait 20 minutes because it's life and death now. And if the decree goes through, who will eat matzah next year? There won't be any Jews next year. So I tell you, we have to fast now. And in my terminology, what she's saying back to Mordechai is, you missed your own signal. You missed your own signal. You said it's crucial. The decision's being made now. 11 months doesn't count. You couldn't even take off 20 minutes. I'm telling you that you shouldn't eat and drink either. You should fast. Now, Vayavro Mordechai, says the Midrash, means he passed over his better judgment. He gave in to her. He accepted her reasoning. This means he said her signal, and she missed it. And when played back to him, he missed his own signal. In each case, he corrects her when she misses the signal, and she corrects him when he misses the signal. Not only that, but look at the symmetry of the language. The symmetry of the language is unbelievable. Look at verse 8. Mordechai, in his first response to Esther, gave him a copy of the decree, which was distributed in Shushan for destruction, so that he might show it to Esther and inform her. Oh, the English, I think, kills this. Yes, bidding. You don't know what bidding means. Oh, you think this is an auction. In the Hebrew, it's letzavos aleha, to command her. Hello, Mordechai sending her a command. Go into the king and beg for the Jews, right? Okay, what does it say in the last verse? Mordechai then left and did exactly as Esther had commanded him. He commands her and she commands him. And they accept it from each other. They accept their misunderstanding, their mistaken judgment. Each one accepts it from the other. And that's how the salvation takes place. Salvation takes place because of husband and wife working together, each one honoring the other, each one willing to listen to the other and change because of the perceptions of the other. That's how it's a successful outcome. I think this is exquisite. It's not unique. There are other places where there are exchanges like this, but here it's really right on it's more or less on the surface, and it's worth telling people about it, especially people who are about to get married or going to for shidduchim. It's a beautiful passage. Yeah.
So it says over here that they were that Esther commanded him that they were going to fast at night also.
That's right. It says day and night. The words are there in the verse, day and night.
How is it possible for somebody to go without water for 3 days? Usually, nowadays, if somebody would do that, they would die. You need to drink water.
No, that's not true.
No?
No.
At least they would be very physically ill.
It depends on what they're doing. Also, if they're lost in the desert and they're baking in the sun and they're walking because they have to walk and they're not eating and drinking, is one thing. But if you know that that's what's going to happen and you take measures to be calm and about it and so on and so on, I don't think that's true. Okay. In fact, very interesting. The Gemara says about Nedorim, a person who takes a neder not to sleep for 3 days and 3 nights, you give him lashes right away because we know that's impossible. He's made a neder that's impossible to keep. He's guilty of a false neder right away. You don't have to wait for him to drowse off in day 2. You don't have to wait. But it doesn't say that about eating and drinking. So I think that physically it is possible. Okay, now story continues. Chapter 5. Now, here we have a crucial bit of ambiguity, which is very important. Now, it came to pass on the third day, Esther donned royalty, that means she put on royal clothes, and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, facing the king's house, while the king was sitting on the throne in the throne room, facing the chamber's entrance. There's actually a picture of this in ancient Persian records. And you see it's a small room, and he's sitting there facing the doorway, and he has a very large golden scepter from the ground all the way up. And at least if the dimensions in the picture are accurate, you could take the scepter and lean it all the way to the entrance, so that someone standing there could touch the scepter and be accepted, even though normally they would be killed. When the king noticed Queen Esther standing at the court, she won his favor. King extended to Esther the gold scepter, which is in his hand. Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Okay, now, you know what the scenario is from here on out. She makes a banquet this day, and she invites the king and Haman, and then she says to the king and Haman, I want to make another banquet tomorrow, and tomorrow I'll do what I told the king, I've kept for the king my identity. Tomorrow is the climax. And tomorrow, that's when she identifies herself as a Jew, and she pleads on behalf of the Jewish people. So the question is, when the text says here, the third day, and it's the third day for the first banquet, which third day is that? Third day from what? And there are two possibilities. Either it's the third day from the day on which they're sitting, which is the 13th, so it'll be the 14th, 15th, and 16th. And then, I guess, one second, let me get this right. Let me make a mistake here. No, the third day, that's one possibility, 14th and 16th, or it's the third day counting the 13th, 13, 14, and 15. 13, 14, and 15 makes perfectly good sense, because that means on day 15, which is the second day of the fast, she'll go in the first time. And at that time she'll say, come to the banquet tomorrow. No one cares that she isn't eating at the banquet, right? Remember, she's there as a bauble of beauty and charm, that's all, right? The 15th is the second day of the fast, that's the first banquet. The second banquet, the climax, that's the banquet at which she's going to ask for mercy for the Jewish people. And that's at the climax of the fast. That makes perfectly good sense. That's one way of reading third. But the other way of reading, and the commentators are split, the other way of reading third is the third day of the fast. So that means this time, the first time she goes in is the 16th already. The third day of the fast. And what does she do? She goes in and she says, let's have a banquet. And at the banquet she says, come tomorrow. And the next day, which now would be the 17th, the next day she reveals that she's Jewish and pleads on behalf of the Jewish people. That's hard to understand. That day, the 17th, the day in which she's making her plea on behalf of the Jewish people, the people are eating pizza and pepperoni and salami sandwiches, and they broke the fast last night. Wouldn't you want to have maximum merit at the moment of the plea on behalf of the Jewish people? Why would you do it after the fasting's over? The answer is something very, very profound. Yeah, that's right. The day after the second banquet is when the plea to Ahasuerus is going to be made to save the Jewish people. But the first day, now, when she goes into the inner sanctum without being called, this is when the outcome is being decided. This is the tipping moment. If she gets in now, it's all over. Tomorrow's just an afterthought. It's a given. It's guaranteed. Why? Because the king is sitting on the throne. Now, the king. Not King Achashverosh, the king. And we said when it says the king, it's referring not only to Achashverosh, but to the Creator also. And he's sitting in a place where he's making strict judgment. He's not planning parties for the people. He's deciding something with the strictest judgment. And he's holding a golden scepter. Gold is the color of strict judgment. And there's a law. The law is if you go in, you die. You have the entire power of strictness in play here. And she comes against the law and appears. If she passes that test, if he accepts her, he hands her, he leans over to her the golden scepter, and she touches it, it's over. The drama is over. The rest of it is guaranteed. That's why this would be on the third day of the fast. And tomorrow, when she pleads on behalf of the Jewish people, they're eating pizza, perfectly all right, because the drama is over. And it's a very, very profound, slightly Kabbalistic interpretation, but the commentaries in Pshat are divided as to whether it was the third day of the fast or the third day, counting the day on which the events were taking place. So you have to explain it both ways. I think that's a very, very profound idea. Are we together? Okay, now, verse 3 again. The king said to her, oh, well, we didn't do this before yet. What is it for you, Queen Esther? And what is your petition? Even if behalf of the king, it shall be granted you. Now he asks her two questions here, and you'll see this repeats a number of times. He asks her two questions. In this case, what is it to you? Meaning, like, what's bothering you? What's on your mind? What do you want? For that, there's no limitation. And then he says, and what is your petition? So there must be two things. Something that you want and a petition. And for the petition, he says, up to half the kingdom, and it'll be given to you. So for the petition, whatever it is, there's a limit. That's up to half. Whereas if it's something that you want, there's no limitation whatsoever. The understanding of it is this. Yes, there are two different ways in which a person comes. Maybe there are more than two, but she could want something for herself. A palace, a mink coat, who knows? More servants, He said, whatever you want, Esther, it's yours. I have no limitations what I would give to you. Petition, something that deals with politics, something that deals with social policy, economics, war and peace. Don't destabilize the kingdom. Don't destabilize the kingdom. Leave the majority in place. I can't tolerate that. You could be Esther in capital letters in red. Doesn't matter. Whoever you are, don't destabilize the kingdom. That I'm not going to accept. I'll say no to you also. So you see again how he's concerned about his position vis-a-vis the population, and even for Esther, he puts a limitation on it and says, no, that I can't take, even from you. So look how she answers. 4, if it please the king, I'm here because he wants only to act out his pleasure. I know that. I have no standing, no authority, no position, nothing, zero. I'm a bauble. So if it pleases the king, because I know that's all that matters. All that matters is what happens please the king. Let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I prepared for him. I'm making a banquet for the king. So the king is not a dope. He understands that that's not what she came risking her life to do, to invite him to lunch. He understands something else is involved, and this is like the prelude. And he's right. Okay. The king commanded, tell Haman to hurry, fulfill Esther's wish. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther prepared. Then king said to Esther during the feast, what is your request? It shall be granted you. And what is your petition? Oh, excuse me. So I don't know. Maybe they're quoting some commentators, but the commentators that I understand is not what they wrote here. This is the repeat. It's not that he's giving up on the condition of half the kingdom. He's saying up to half the kingdom, yes, but not more. He's repeating it. He's not changing his mind. So again, there's a request for you, no limitations. A petition, up to half the kingdom and not more. So Esther answered and said, my request and my petition, you're right, king, you're right. I have two things on my mind. Something for myself and something that has social implications. If I have won the king's favor, because everything depends upon his favor. The only thing that matters is he likes it, he wants it. That's all. Nothing. Not justice and long-term consequence. No. I just want to please the king. She knows her lines. I please the king to grant me my request, to perform my petition. Again, request and petition. So you see, this is important. He said it, and she's imitating it over and over again. Let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do the king's bidding. I will do according to the word of the king. Now this is utterly mysterious. In this chapter, you have no clue what she could possibly be talking about. Obviously, he wants something from her, and she hasn't done it. So she says, tomorrow, I'll do it, right? Now, we saw already at the beginning that she hid her identity, and we saw that Achashverosh took measures to try to discover what her identity was, including measures that might frighten her, and he got nowhere. So this is an outstanding problem. And he wants it, and she's saying no, that's all. And she has enough charm that he doesn't want to give her up, but it's a thorn in his side. And she says, tomorrow, I'll do the king's bidding. This is not what she risked her life for. Lunch today, lunch tomorrow, and tomorrow I'll tell you what, this is not what he knows that. He knows something else is in the offing here. So, but he's patient. He's patient. The banquet's so nice anyway, Yeah.
It says, I'll do the king's bidding, but I thought the king is trying to do Esther's bidding.
Well, that's not a contradiction, is it? I do for you what you want, and you do for me what I want.
No, but
all business is based on that.
The king is waiting for. Isn't the king waiting for her to say, "Oh, what do you want?"
She knows what he wants. He was dying to know who she is. He gave debt relief to the provinces and gifts all over the kingdom to get people to talk. Everybody should know and be talking about the fact that he's marrying
that's
Esther.
What she means by the king's bidding.
The king's bidding is he wants to know who I am.
Okay.
And Mordechai told me, don't do that. So I didn't do that. Tomorrow, she says, what you've wanted for years already, tomorrow you'll have it. Tomorrow I'll tell you who I am. Right? But that's not her purpose in risking her life. To have lunch today, lunch tomorrow, and tell him who she is. She didn't risk her life for that. Obviously, she wants something. And she said, my request and my petition. And she hasn't mentioned what they are yet. So there's unfinished business here. Of course, it's going to be to plead on behalf of the Jewish people. But, so that's what she says at the first banquet. Okay, now, that day, Haman went out joyful and exuberant. Man, oh man, he's on top of the world. He'll give you a list of all the things that are good for him in a moment. On top of the world. But when Haman noticed Mordechai in the king's gate, and that he neither stood up nor stirred before him, Haman was infuriated with Mordechai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Again, because as he said the first time, it would be small-minded, insignificant, and would cause him crushing social disappointment if he took a measure against Mordechai alone. So he doesn't want to do that. He sent for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Notice the order: friends first and wife second. And Haman recounted to them the glory of his wealth and of his many sons, and every instance where the king had promoted him and advanced him above the officials and royal servants. Haman said, moreover, Queen Esther invited me, no one but myself, to accompany the king to the banquet that she had prepared. And tomorrow, too, I am invited by her along with the king. Yet all of this means nothing to me, so long as I see that Jew, Mordechai, sitting at the king's gate. Now, as you know, probably my view of psychologists is not wholly trusting. I think there are all sorts of critiques that could be leveled against the psychological establishment. But boy, oh boy, do we need a psychologist here. This guy has everything. Tell me that your life isn't perfect. It isn't perfect. I have all these wonderful things, but it bothers me that Mordechai doesn't bow. I hear that. I could also hear it wasn't true, but okay, I could hear it. But all of this, it means nothing to me? Nothing? Could be an instance of what they call perfectionism. You know, if a thing isn't perfect, then it's worthless. Any fly in the ointment, worthless. But that's a sickness. That's a psychological sickness. So, I think that it's very, very extreme, this statement that Haman is making. Now, I've mentioned to you, I'm going to just tell this thing, then I'll take your question. Maybe almost it was 20 years ago, I was teaching this, and there was a beginner in the room. And he said, Rabbi, you told us that when it says the king without saying Achashverosh, it refers to both the flesh and blood king and also to the creator of the universe. And here it says, Mordechai says, all this means nothing to me when I see Mordechai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Which king is that? Is this Achashverosh's gate? Or maybe in addition, at the gate of the Creator. And he said, what Haman is bragging of, there are verses in Jeremiah about this, the Rambam writes about this in the Moreh Nevuchim and the Guide of the Perplexed. What he's bragging about is earthly success. When the person is close to the Creator of the universe, his success makes any earthly condition zero. Makes it zero. It's not just, I'm 62, and this makes it 92, and it adds on, and it's nice, and maybe it's bigger than each individual feature, or maybe that was 32, and this is 92 because it's 60. No. Closeness to the Creator of the universe makes everything else zero. And Haman knows that. He knows that. He knows that Mordechai is sitting at the gate of the King of the universe. And that perspective infects him from that position where everything that I have is worthless. It kills him. This was said by a beginner. He said it without my drama, I realize that. But it was said by a beginner. I thought that was a brilliant suggestion with truth to it. So, this is where Haman is holding, because Mordechai isn't bowing. It deprives him of satisfaction from the whole of his success. Yes, you wanted to ask a question?
The way it seems, he seems very, I can't figure out what the word is. I wouldn't say emotional, but he's very, dramatic when something goes his way or when something doesn't go his way.
Well, I think that's right. And
from the fact that before it says he went out joyful and exuberant.
Yeah.
And then as high it was before, it can also be immediately just as low.
That's a nice observation. I didn't notice that. That's a nice observation. He's described in emotional terms.
So there are psychological, there's probably some sort of condition where someone's like...
Bipolar.
Is it bipolar?
I don't think so, because it was caused by external circumstances. But I don't know bipolar well enough. I can't say. It could very well be, as far as I don't know enough to say. Yeah.
Now this is always hard for me to understand about people like Bilam and Haman and evil people who knew that God. According to this explanation, he knew that God existed and he knew that Hashem was going to reward Mordechai and not him. So why didn't he do Shuvah?
There is a statement in the Chazal, "Afilu pischo shel Gehenim harishoyim einam osim tshuva." Even at the entrance to Gehenim, they don't do tshuva. See, I had a case recently. let's say you catch somebody doing something wrong. Sometimes they try to justify it. Sometimes they try to rationalize it. They don't want to admit that they've been caught. Now, that's a weakness, but it is a natural human response. I saw this when I was a professor at Hopkins. People would come to the department to read papers, professors. And we would listen and we would react. The professors at Hopkins were pretty good, and the graduate students, some of them were really pretty good. And sometimes the guy reading the paper got caught. He made a mistake. Almost always, he did not admit it. He did not admit it. He tried to cover it up, tried to change the subject. He would just not simply say, "Oh, I see what you're saying. Right, it's a mistake, and I'll have to work on it again." No. This idea of not being willing to admit a mistake. I'll tell you where else it works. I've said this to people in another context. You're arguing with somebody about a moral issue or about a religious issue, and they fight you to the end, and they don't give in at all. Don't think that their public response is a true indication of what's going on inside. Inside, they may realize that you have a point, and they don't want to admit it. They don't want to lose face in public. And it could be that you're making an impact on them. Don't give up and say, "Well, I couldn't convince him." No. He could, as we say in Yiddish, grizzle over that. It could sit and stew inside and have an effect on him. So there are people who don't want to lose face. I remember when they were negotiating with the Vietnamese. So the United States and the Vietnamese came to the negotiating room. What shape shall the table be? And what size shall the table be? And what will be the implication if it's a circular table and some parts are close to the other parts and some parts are close to each other? No, that can't be. The shape of the table? You're coming to try to end a war. No! The shape of the table has to be right, because otherwise it looks like you're giving in, it looks like you're inferior. Okay. So I think that emotionalism is correct. I think that's a nice observation. And of course, emotions can distort your thinking. There's no question about it. I always find this passage where he says it's worthless to me. Worthless? It's just, it's like perfectionism. Like I say, it isn't perfect. Some kids are victimized by their parents. You got a 97? Where were the other 3 points? Our kids who grow up like that. Horrible. Yeah.
Isn't he maybe like kind of indicating that he's admitting that his spiritual success is really nothing, and he's realizing that everything that matters is the ruchniut, and you see that he doesn't have it, but Mordechai has it.
Yeah, that's what this student said. Yeah. That's what the student said. And even if it's like, "Oh, I would never do that, and I would never do tshuva," but I realize I'm being outclassed. What he has is infinitely superior to what I have. Where you might see it? You might see it in marriage. You see two people in marriage who clearly love one another. But you see what they do for one another. And you say, "Gee, it's beautiful to see how they love one another, but I'm not doing that. I'm not doing those things. I'm not going to live that way. It's too much. I can't do all of that." Right? So he knows that the relationship that he has in his marriage is second rate, but he's just not willing to make the investment. What he doesn't know is that it's worth it. It pays itself 100 times over. Okay, very good.